Angkor is often reduced to one image: stone towers rising above trees. But stand on the ground around those towers and the city becomes harder to see. Much of it was built from earth, timber, thatch, water, and vegetation. Houses disappeared, roads softened into the landscape, ponds filled with sediment. Canals became shallow lines. What survives most dramatically is not the whole city. It is the stone fraction of a much larger world.
This episode is a reconstruction, not actual footage. UNESCO Archaeological Survey, excavation, environmental evidence, and remote sensing let researchers map reservoirs, dykes, channels, moats, roads, occupation mounds, ponds, and residential extensions. Domestic buildings are less certain because wood and thatch rarely survive like sandstone.
The question is not simply how Angkor built temples. It is how Angkor moved water across a city. Begin north of the monumental core toward the highlands. Seasonal rain falls over the catchment. Water moves downhill across a broad plain toward Tonle Sap to the south. In a natural landscape, that flow can nourish fields, flood low ground, cut channels, and disappear during dry periods. Angkor's builders did not command the monsoon. They modified the routes through which its water moved. The broad direction ran from hills and catchment in the north, across the urban plain, toward Tonle Sap in the south. Reservoirs, canals, dykes, roads, moats, and bypasses altered that movement. But the network was never one perfect blueprint. It accumulated over centuries and changed with the city. Some of its most visible components were barays, enormous rectangular reservoirs defined by earthen embankments. They are easy to describe as giant irrigation tanks. The evidence is more complicated.
Research on Angkor's water network indicates that water could be collected, stored, distributed, diverted, or released for several purposes, including agriculture, flood control, ritual, and urban management. Earlier channels could both distribute water and carry it away. Later additions increasingly moved surplus south toward Tonle Sap. A reservoir, moat, or canal may have served different roles at different times.
At human scale, a baray could appear quiet and vast. A long earthen bank, broad water under a heavy sky, grass, mud, and people reduced to small figures. At a channel junction, the engineering problem becomes more visible. Where does water go when there is too much, and where can it be held when there is too little? In simplified terms, rain enters from the north. One route fills storage, another feeds a moat or local channel, another bypass carries excess away. The surviving evidence reveals the broad logic, not every gate and flow on every day.
If you enjoy history rebuilt from landscapes rather than only monuments, subscribe after this map. The next layer is the city that the water system served.
Angkor was a form of low-density urbanism. It did not need continuous masonry streets and blocks to be a city. Archaeologists have mapped occupation mounds, household ponds, earthen roads, canals, fields, and residential extensions spread across the plain. Temple complexes were religious and political centers, but they were also supported by people who cooked, cultivated, carried, maintained, stored, built, and served. At human height, the city becomes domestic. An ordinary timber and thatch house might stand on a slightly raised occupation mound with a small pond nearby. The ground is damp but not flooded. A woven basket, clay vessel, and repaired roof edge make the household specific without pretending we know one exact family. A more prosperous service compound near a stone causeway or temple enclosure might have fuller storage and more maintained surfaces, even though much of its architecture remained perishable. At a poorer edge, thatch could be thin, earth-worn, vessels sparse, and a channel partly choked with plants. Monumental Angkor did not make every household monumental. Food also complicates the familiar picture. Rice agriculture mattered profoundly. Yet archaeobotanical work at Angkor warns that Khmer life cannot be reduced to rice alone. Ordinary food processing involved crops, garden or gathered plants, water resources, and household containers rather than one endless rice field or ceremonial banquet. Now focus on maintenance. Every canal changes, silt accumulates, banks erode, plants take root. A cut that moves water well in one season may overflow in another. Large infrastructure is not only a royal idea, it is repeated labor. One worker might clear vegetation from a narrow channel while another steadied a basket. Water would slide past a repaired bank. Carriers moved along an earthen road beside a dike rather than through it. These are reconstructed types, not named historical individuals. Their labor makes the engineering honest. Then the weather changes. During heavy monsoon rain, clouds gather, leaves bend, water rises, and overflow reaches controlled junctions. Soil darkens, ponds ripple, thatch becomes wet, runoff begins to move. During a dry period, the same landscape carries lower water, exposed banks, heat haze, brittle vegetation, and people moving carefully near a remaining pond. A reservoir does not have to vanish for seasonal stress to matter.
Research on Angkor's later history suggests that the very scale and accumulated complexity of the network could create systemic vulnerability when climate became more extreme. Channels, embankments, and old modifications constrained where water could go. Damage at key points could redirect flows in ways that were difficult to repair.
But one broken dam cannot explain a statement as large as the city collapsed. Angkor's transformation involved political change, shifting settlement, infrastructure reorganization, and what some researchers describe as urban diaspora. People did not all disappear on one night. Some systems continued, some were reused, some became redundant. The monumental landscape remained meaningful long after the urban configuration changed. A single route could pass through several phases, a functioning channel, a repaired edge, and later a quieter, partly overgrown course. That sequence represents changing use, not a fantasy ruin swallowing a city. Return to the map. Water entered a landscape from the north. Angkor stored some, redirected some, spread some, used some, and sent surplus toward the lake. Reservoirs, channels, dykes, ponds, moats, roads, fields, homes, and temples shaped one another. That system made Angkor more than a temple complex. It made Angkor a city built through relationships between water, earth, labor, and power.
Subscribe to World History Rebuilt, like the episode If the Landscape Changed How You Picture Angkor, and continue to the next reconstructed world in the playlist.